Welcome to a new module. In this module, we are going to learn how to make the authentication and creating the user's API. Let's get a quick information how to create all of this process and how to secure our backend. The concept which is followed in every server or authentication server is as following. First, the user is signing in using his ID or email and password, and then the authentication server will answer him with authenticated if he has the right credentials and JWT, which is called JSON Web Token, and this token will be returned to the user so the user can use it to get the other APIs like products and orders. And of course, the user has not all rights to do what he wants with the backend. So we can differentiate between the admins and the users, but they are in the same table. So some users will have special ability to do some creating products, creating orders, removing orders, changing the states of the product, etc. So when the user has this token, he can pass it with any API call, for example, creating a product, to the server and to the API which we created previously, and then the server will say, yeah, you are verified and you can make the API call. So the user here or the server here will respond either with authenticated, you are okay, you get response, you get what you did, and also if there is no authentication, the server is answering like you are not authenticated user to do this API call. So in the next lectures, we will see the main steps as the following. So first we will take a look to the user model and schema so we can create exactly the schema which we need for the users, exactly how we did it before with the products. And then we are going to post or register a new user with the REST API. So when we have a user in our eShop, so we are going to register him and then he can make his orders. Hashing the user password. Of course, we are not going to save the password in the database exactly as it. So we have to make the password somehow is hashed. So if there is some attack and someone stole the database, then they will not use the user password again in our webshop. Next, we will see how to get user and list of users, but we are excluding the password. So we are going to learn how to exclude parts from our APIs. And then update user data with and without password. So sometimes the user want to update his profile. So I just want to change my name. I want to change my address. So I just say that I want to update this data, but I don't want to update my password. But also when I have forgotten my password, I can reset it. And then in this case, we are going to update the user data with the password. Then we will go to the important part where we are going to protect the APIs. So for example, not any user is able to create a product, only the admin. Also, not any user is able to change the state of the order, only the admins. So we are going to see how to protect these APIs so the user cannot send any request only if he is authenticated. And then we will see how to log in the user after we created this user so the person can log into the shop and get a token so he can use it to get a product or place an order. Also, as we talked before, maybe the server can respond with authentication error. So when you are requesting an API and you are not authenticated, then you will get an error. We will see how to handle that. Also, we are able to add more secret information to the user, so through the token. So we can also specify or differentiate between the users and the admins. So we can say something like is admin, but where I can hide this information, because if I put it as a plain, then everyone can change the data and say I am admin and he can have access. But here we will hide the token of is admin inside the token. Also, At the end, for statistics, as we always do, we get the user count or how many customers we have in our webshop. That's it for now, so let's go and start with the user schema. As we had in our user model before, we see that we need a name and email and password, etc. So let's build our user schema exactly how we have it in this model on the right. I wrote them already, so we can quickly go over them and then you can implement it from the code which I am going to upload to the resources. First, the name of the user is a string and it's required. Second, the email is a string and also true, required. And also the password hash, we said we will save the password hashed in the database, so it will be a string and it's required. The phone number of the user also will be a string or a number and with the true and it's required. Here we will identify the user if he is admin on the shop or no, so it will be a boolean and the default value is false. The address, which will be used for shipping the order of the user, so we can use a street like a string and the default is empty value. Apartment is also string, zip code is a string, city and country. And at the end, we have a user schema. As we did previously with the products, we created a virtual ID, so we would get ID in that way, not in that way. So it's more user or front-end friendly, so we can use it in the front end as a normal ID to fetch user data or identify a user. And here we enable the virtuals for this schema. And here the normal export of the module and the schema. So this is all about the user schema. We will move now to create a user or register a user in our webshop. In this lecture, we will see how to register or post a new user. As any post request, we can also post the user data in the body of the request and then submit them to the database. So to make it quick, let's copy one of the post requests which we have before, for example, the category. So let's copy this one and then paste it in our user route module and start to add the body requests based on the model which we had before for the user. So let's fill all these fields like we got them from the front end as normal and paste them here in our request. So first of all, I will adjust this to be user, and here we will use user model, and then I will wait to save the user, and then if there is no user, then response with the error that the user cannot be created or registered. So let's add the fields which we need now. So I will separate these two screens and then I will add my fields here. So name, the same name, and email will be email, and here the body email. Let's do quickly for the rest. Now our new user model will look like this. So I put all the keys or all the fields which I got them from the schema, and I assumed that I am getting that from the body of the request. So this body and request will come from Postman or from the front end, how we will see next. Let's try that with the Postman now. So we will create an object, for example, and I will assign a user and a password hash and all this information in that object. So what will be the full route for that? So it will be the API route and then users. Why? Because in the app.js we had before all APIs routes are defined here. So I am saying app use products and then I assign the products routes. And then here we will have users. So in our API we will use users. So going to the front end, let's copy one of the APIs we had before and paste it here. And here instead of products we will say users. That's perfect. So let's add a post and then in the body we will add a row and the type of this row is JSON because the user will send the data in a JSON format. And then let's create our object here. So I will say the name, and I assign any name, for example, James. And the same thing for the rest. So let's fill them. So we have here the password hash, the phone number, the admin, yes or no, apartment, zip code, city, and country. So in this case, we will have one user which has these properties. We should not put the password like this, so we have to hash it, as we will see in the next lecture. So I post the data now, and I get all of this information. So we have here name, then username, and the data and all information which we entered. And also the API responded with ID and underscore ID. So the user has created in the database. Let's check our database on Atlas. So when we go to our cluster and then collections, I will access our database, which is users or eShop database, and the table users, and we will see the user is created here. I think I missed one field, which is not sent with the API, so we have to add it. So let's add it here, which is street. So we put street also, and street, for example, 100. I'm going to add different users with different names to fill our database. So I will say James, for example, I will say Tom, and Tom here, and he has same password. Let's assume he has 777 here, and the same address, for example, and we will send. We will have also the same data. Add also another user like Mike, and we will have here Mike, small m, and also the same information, like let's say here 888, and the street number, for example 5, the flat is 4. So in this case, in our database we had 3 users. As we will see here, I am refreshing the page, and we will see here that we have 3 users. Saving the password in this case as a plain text is not secure, because if someone got somehow our database, he will see the list of all passwords of all users in our database. So it's better somehow to hash it or encode it somehow, so anyone cannot understand what is the real password behind this hashing or this encoding. To do that, there is a library. It's provided by Node.js. It's called bcrypt.js. We can install it here in a new window. So npm install bcrypt.js, and I'm going to install this library and then import it in my application. So I will say const bcrypt and require bcrypt.js. So how we will use this library? So I will not ask the user or the front end for a password hash. I will ask for a normal password, but internally in my backend, I will encrypt this password. So here I will say bcrypt dot hash sync, and then hash sync will ask for a string and also something called salt. The salt is, for example, like extra secret information, so any person cannot decrypt this hash. So for example, I will add here my secret. You can add any secret. For example, you can say my secret. You can add anything. I will add here, for example, number. It's 10. And I will not ask the user for a password hash, but I will ask him simply for a password. Let's try that now, and let's see what the server or the backend will respond to us after encrypting the password. So here, let's create another user, password, not password hash. So it will be from 1 to 6 also, and he has some information like we had previously. Let's make him admin, for example, and I will send, and we will see here the password hash is like this. So it's not exactly what the user sent. So we will use somehow when we log in, we will compare this hash with the password which the user used when he logged in. This is also will be done by bcrypt library. So now we have a secure backend or secure object of the user, so nobody can resolve or decrypt this information. As we saw before that we created get request to get list of users, and also we can create the same thing for getting a single user. So copying it from categories also, and I'm going to change this category with user. So in this way we have get list of users and get single user. Let's try that with a postman. I go here and I want get one user which has his ID like this, and I want list of users, then I get them like that. We have a security issue here. I don't want to send the list of users with their password hash, so it's better to send the API or the API fields without password hash. How we can do that? Previously we saw that we can exclude some parts from our API or some fields. So how we do that? After we call the find method, we put select, and then I press minus, and then with minus I can specify what field it should be excluded. For example, here in this case I will say password hash, and then when I call the API I will see that I got fields without password hash. Let's do that also for the single user. I will put here select, or we can copy this directly. It works also with find by ID, like with find and with find by ID. Save it, try it, and let's get, for example, this user with this ID. I post it here, and we see that we got that user without any password hash. We can also, when getting a list of users, for example in the admin panel of my application, I just want to display the name of the user and, for example, phone number and email. So in this case you can create an API which has only these fields. So you can select not with minus, but you can say name, phone, email. So then you will get only these fields with this request of this API. So let's get them. We got name, email, and phone only. This is very helpful when you want, for example, when you have a big list and then this big list you want to reduce it. So you want only to select a specific fields which you want to use in the front end. Let's put it back to password hash. So I want only to exclude the password hash and get list of users with all their details. In this lecture, we will see how the user can log in and use the APIs. So he is required to have his email or ID and password, and then send them somehow with API to authentication server, and the authentication server will respond with JWT, which is JSON Web Token, and say that the user is authenticated and is able to use the APIs which are secured. Let's start doing the first part. So we need to create a post request where person can send his username and password to the server. So let's first create a post request in our users API. So I will say router.post, and then the path will be login, and then we will save in async method the request and the response, and we will have the callback here. Let's do the login by email. So we will expect in the response body email and password. So first we need to know if this user exists. I really have a user with this email. So first I will create constant, give it user, and this user will have a wait method exactly how we did before. user and find one. Like I want to find user by email. So I will say here, find one, and then it will be object. I can assign which field I want to search the user by. For example, I want to search by email. So here I will say email, and the email will come from the request.body.email. So here I have the user already which are sent to log in by the email. So if I get a user, or if I don't get a user, I will send error. So we will do that, return user or response dot status 400 dot send, and then we will say the user not found. Otherwise, I will send in the response that the user is found, and it will be in the send object like user. Let's try that out to be sure that this is working. So here I need a post request, and I remove this, and here we will have a login, and then we don't need all of this. We just need the email, as we said, and the password of the user. So here I will have password. For example, let's say 1234, send it, and then we will get this user really exists with this email. Let's make mistake in the email 2 for example, I will get the user not found. So we are on the right path now. So we found the user which we want to log in. To log in a user, we need to compare the password which he entered and with the password which is already exist in the database. But we have already a hash password. So we need somehow to unhash or decode this password and then compare it with the password which you sent by the user, and then I say, okay, you are right, you are authenticated. So after I be sure that I have a user in my database with that email, I want to check that if there is user we had before and bcrypt with comparing, I can compare two passwords with the hash. So I will say the request.body.password which is sent by the user, and then compare it with the user.password hash, like the user which I found with his password hash. So if this comparison success, I will say, for example, send to the backend or to the front end. We will say, for example, response.status, for example, 200.send user, else we delete this part and we say, for example, with 400 and say password is wrong. Let's try that out. And here, for example, I have this password, username. I will say password is wrong. But you remember we have the password in this way from 1 to 6 and the user got authenticated. So when the password is wrong, we get password is wrong. So now we come to the important part. So we saw before that the server will respond with JSON Web Token. So from where I will get JSON Web Token in the backend? In Node.js, there is a library called JSON Web Token. So we need to install this library. So I go to the other window which I had for installation. I will say npmi and then JSON Web Token. Installing this library will give me the ability to use JSON Web Tokens. So let's have it in our constants or imports. We can say, can call it JVT require JSON Web Token. So I can use this variable now or constant to generate the JSON Web Token. How to do that? So when the user is authenticated and everything goes fine, so I will say const token, and then I will use this library JSON web token dot sign. There is a method there, and this method accepting the object with a payload and secret, which is secret or private key. We will talk about the secret. So this JVT.sign, as we saw before, it's asking for object, and this object will have, for example, you can pass anything. I can say, for example, user ID, and the user ID will have, for example, user.id, the user which I got here, and with his ID. So here you can pass the data which you want with the token. We will see how to resolve the token in the front end, and also how you can compare the token in the Authentication API. And here, in the second parameter, we need to pass a secret. Secret is something like, for example, a password which is used to create your tokens. So it can be any string. For example, I will say, for example, secret. And after that, there is options. And in these options, we can add some options to the token, like expiration date, which we will see later. And in the request sending success, we will send the user with his token. So I will say send user, and user, for example, email. Let's send only the email, and the token. So in this way, the user will get the token in the front end and can use it to access the API. Let's try that out. So I go to Postman. I will use login again. We have password wrong. Let's put the right password. And then I got the email and a token. So this token is created by the secret, which we have here. So you can make what you want. And this secret, nobody knows about it. So anyone create a token like with the same tokens which are used in your web shop. So in this case, any user send with the API, for example, any token, and then it will have the right response because he doesn't have the secret. We will see how to resolve the token with the secret which we created, so the user can get the right response. So if you remember, we have here the environment variables. So here we can put our secret. For example, I can say here secret, my dog is nice. So I say here secret, and we will use it here. We will say constant, and then let's say secret is process dot environment variables dot secret, which I created here. So let's pass this secret instead of the hard-coded string. Let's check that again to be sure everything went fine. So we got a new token. So sometimes you see that when you are logged into a website, in the next day, automatically you are logged out. This happens because this token got expired. So the server has some expiration time. So when you try to use this token again, the server will respond to you, sorry, this token is expired. How to set expiration time? The third parameter of this sign method, it has options. And these options can be one of them, for example, expire in. Expire in, you can specify 1 day, 1 week, 1 month. If I want 1 day, I say 1D. If I want 1 week, I say 1W. So normally, let's look, for example, for our web shop, we have the token for 1 day. When I come again after 1 day to use any API and I am loading the expired token, then the server will say, sorry, you cannot use this API because it's expired. Let's save it, and we will see in the next lecture how to protect our APIs so the user cannot use any API only if he has the token. We saw before how the user now has the token. Now he can use it to access the data or our APIs. But how we can make our server protected so no one can use the API without a token? As we saw before in our app.js, we had a middleware, and the middleware is checking everything going to the server before it gets executed. So here in this point, I want to check if the user is authenticated or not. The sequence to do that, normally I create in my, for example, I want to create some helper folder, and in helpers folder I will create a new file, call it for example jvt.js, and there is a library called express.gwt, which is used normally to secure the APIs in our server. So let's install this library, npm i express.gwt, and let's ask for it. So I will say constant express.gwt, and then it will require express.gwt. The protection function will be as the following. So I will create a function, call it authentication or auth.gwt, and this method will return express.gwt as a function, and this function, it has options. We talked before about the secret. The secret is based on some string where we can create our token. So when someone pass any token to our, for example, backend, we need to compare it with the secret. So if the token is generated based on that secret, then he will have access to the API. But when his token based on different secret, then the API will not work. And as you remember, we have imported this secret or put it in the environment variables. So here I will say const secret again, and then process.environment.secret. Another option which we need to pass also is the algorithm is generating this token. If we go to the website of gwt.io, we will see that the token can be generated based on many algorithms. Here are the most used. For example, I'm using HS256, which also library JSON Web Token is using. So we can have, for example, algorithms is array HS256. Now we export this method with the module. So we say module.exports is auth.gwt. So in this way we will be able to use it in our app.js. So here I will say app.use auth.gwt coming from constant auth.gwt, which is require helpers.gwt. So the middleware is used now. Now our server is secured based on the token. So any request will be asked authentication.gwt, and then we go here, express.gwt will return for us if it's possible that the user can use this API or not based on his token. So let's check now if our API is protected or not. So I will ask for a get of list of products. I go here, I send the request, and then I see that unauthorized error. So no authorization token was found. Express.jwt returned for me this error. So I need somehow to handle this error and send to the user the required data. But first, how we can add a token to the request? Normally, adding a token with a request comes with authorization in Postman, and also in the front end, you need to use, for example, a bearer token. And bearer token we will need to pass the token which you got after login with the user. There are different types of authentication. We will use here the bearer one. So before we had also here the token after we logged in with the Thomas user, and here we will pass this token. So the authorization here coming for this API loaded with this token. So after I send the request, I will get the right data. If I remove the token, I will notice that I don't have any authorization. In front end, we will see how to load token over the request in the headers. So now we are sure that our token is working. So let's make a change here, make error. We will see that unauthorized error, invalid token. So we have different errors here. So we need to handle this error somehow. We will see that in the next lecture. We saw previously that we got some errors in our API. So we need to handle those errors to be displayed in more beautiful way for the user or the front end. Handling error in Node.js can be done simply in this way. We go to the middleware and we say app use, and we create a function which will contain error as a callback, request, response, and next. In this case, this method will be executed every time there is an error in our API. So here you can check if there is error, then you can send, for example, response.status, like for example, let's say 500 and .json, and in this JSON you say, for example, a message, and this message saying error in the server. So any error can happen in the back end will be called with this message. Let's try that with the error which we got with authorization. So I will make a mistake here in this token. So we will see here that we got error in the server because we have a problem in the token, but we don't know what is the error exactly. So we can classify these errors based on the type, because if we print this error somehow, let's say instead of the message, let's print this error. Made a mistake here and then try. We will see that the error has a name. So based on the name, maybe I can classify the errors, or you can keep it like that. It's up to you, but we can make it more beautiful in the current way. But first, to have a clean app.js, let's move this method to our helpers. So let's create file here, call it error handler.js, and we create a function, call it error handler, and it will have the same parameters, error, request, response, and next. And then we can handle what we have here. So we can take this if, paste it here, and in this way we can keep app.js clean as possible. So here we have to say error handler, and error handler is constant, error handler is required from the helpers and error handler. So based on the type or the name of the error, we can classify our errors. For example, let's say if error dot name, we saw previously that we have a name unauthorized error. So I will return here status 401, and the error will be like a message. We can say the message is, for example, the user is not. As we will see also in the future, we will have type of the errors which is called validation error. We will see that later when we are going to upload photos. So we say error.name will be, for example, validation error. Then the response will be the same as this, but for example, let's be enough now with the error only. We will change this message when we will do the upload of the images and the files. And for general errors, it's better to handle that also. So we have here return response.status, and when there is some general error, we can say it's a server error. So it's 500, and then in the JSON, I send the message as error. Or you can send the error directly without a message. Here we will place return and return here also. So we have now an error handler for our authorization and validation. So now in the front end, when I do some unauthorized thing, so when I ask for an API without any token, then I will get this error. And if I do, for example, I upload a PDF and I am not allowed to upload PDF to our server, so I will get the validation error. And also if there is not classified error here, then we will get the error in general as a message in the JSON. It's nice to have some comments always in the code, so you can place some comments to explain what type of the error is this. Welcome back. Now we have totally a secure API, so nobody can use it without authentication. So in this case, the user, when he wants to log in, he must be authorized. So this is not logical for us. So the user can be able to use the login to get a token. So in this case, we need to exclude somehow this API from to be authenticated. So here, in express GWT, I can say unless, and in this unless, I will have object where I can locate in paths the whole APIs which I want to exclude. For example, let's exclude the login. To do that, I need to specify all APIs which I want them to be excluded. So I can say here API/v1/users and login. So I want this one to be excluded. Let's try that now with Postman, and we are still not authorized. This is because I need to add another slash here. So we go again to Postman, we try it, and we have the token again. So you have to be careful that you have to have the slash here. So we can also add the register. I already added the register API, which is exactly like the post. So here in users, I have the post register, which is exactly the same as post. So the user can also register an account in the web shop. And here is used for the admin who want to remove or add users. But what about products? Products also, I need somehow to get the products for free without authentication. So I don't need the user to be authenticated to get the products, because I don't want people to log in, then they can see my web shop. I need them to get the product list without any authentication. So how we can do that? We need to specify the methods, the HTTP method. So I can say, bring me only the GET requests, but don't allow post. Otherwise, people will be able to post products to my web shop. So to do that, this path method accepting an object, and this object has a first field as a URL, and second field is methods. In URL, I can specify the URL as we have it here, but instead of that, I will use products, and the methods will be get, for example, and options, and those will be in array. So we see here, we specified the API URL, and then we specified the methods. Let's try that. I will go here to get list of products. Without authentication, it works perfect. And when I remove that, it will not work. So it's better to have it like this, so the user can get the product list in the front end. I refactored here the code so it looks more beautiful. So here we have the API variable, which is we get it from environment variable, And here I'm using backticks to inject the variable inside the string. But now we have an issue. Do you remember we had before in the APIs for products we created methods like, for example, get featured. And get featured we need it also to be public because I want to show the featured product in my front end without user authentication. So here, if I want to try it, I go to Postman, post it here, and I say 3 featured products. I will be not authorized. In this case, we need to specify also this URL here. But then we will have very long list of APIs, especially by the time when we have very big web shop, because we need a lot of APIs, not only saying, for example, give me the featured product or give me the product count. So the nice thing here that I can use, instead of string like that, I can use regular expressions. Regular expressions are giving me the ability to specify everything after the products, for example. So here, with this string, I can be able to use this one. So because here I have this star, so anything after products world. So now, after I built my regex, so here I say API/v1/products. Here is escaping slash, so it will not make any conflict with the slash which we have to define. This subject is about regular expressions, so you need to know more about these regular expressions. I am using always a regex tester, which is always located online. There is a beautiful website called regex 101, and here you can test your regular expressions. So here I will take this one and try it in that website. So I say here something like that will be allowed, but if I made mistake here, then it will not be allowed. So it's exactly this formula. So here it's better to use always regular expressions to specify more the APIs and have less code. So let's try it now, and we got our featured products. Let's do also the same thing for categories. So we have here one and categories, so we can get them, and for example we cannot delete or post them. So in the future, when I add more APIs, we need to add some exclusions here always in this path array. We saw before when we had a login that we can specify some data inside the response or inside the token. In this case, I can also pass some secret data which I want to be only comes with the token. So if the user doesn't have this information in the token, I will not allow him to do something. One of the secret information I can pass here is admin. So is admin, I can say this user is admin on the web shop or no. So in this case, I can allow him to log in to the web shop admin panel or not. So the normal user cannot log in, but the admin who has is admin true, he can log in. And of course, in this case, it's better to separate the tables. So I can have users and customers, for example, or users and admins. So this we will see in the next lecture in more detail. Now we have the user, and then I will check user.isAdmin. So in this field, in this token, I can send the user if he is admin or not. Maybe you will tell me why you cannot do that in the front end, like check if the user is admin or not. In this case, the user will be able, for example, some hacker who has experience in programming, he will be able from front end to log in to the admin panel even he doesn't have this ability. He can just create a fake data that he is admin, and then he can put like in the JSON is admin is true, and then he can log in. And this case, it's not good in our web shop. So it's better to have it secured here. So if the user doesn't have the right token which has is admin, then he will not be able to log in to the admin panel. Let's try that and see our token if it's validated right. I will go to Postman and press send. That's good. We have now the token. So we check this token in gwt.io. Go here, try it. I will say also this admin and expiration time. So in this case, person cannot build a token like that because he doesn't have the secret. And if you remember, always the API is checking this token if it was built with that secret which we specified in our backend. As we saw before, that we excluded some API requests to not be authenticated. For example, here the products like get and options should not be authenticated because they will be on public, so any public user can browse the products in my eShop. So the login user who logged into the eShop, he can post products or update products or delete products. But in our case now, the users are customers. So if I am customer and I logged into the eShop, then in this case, I will be able to delete products. And the first seconds I publish this website online, it will get destroyed. If you remember, we created in the model a field which says is admin. So here we specify the user if he is admin or no. In our eShop, we will have also admin panel. And this admin panel is not allowed for normal users to enter, only the admins. So we have here on users table some user roles. We have a customer and we have admin, and they are both of them in the user table. You have freedom here to do, for example, separated tables in this case. But here I wanted to mention the user roles, so you can also make them in same table but with different roles. There are many ways to do user roles in Node.js, but I am going with the simplest way which we need for our eShop. If you remember, after the user got logged in to the application, he was assigned a token, and this token is overloaded with user ID and is admin. And here we know inside the token if the user is admin or not. And when the user sends a request, the JWT library is disassembling this token with the secret code which is provided in our API or in our server, and it will see that if it's really generated from this server or not. So we can identify the user if he has token from our eShop or no. Till now everything is nice, so let's assume that I have a right token and I want also to log in to my eShop as an admin. Letting this way, it will keep us not secure because the user in this case is able to delete or add products. So the Express JWT has a great method that it's reviewing, for example, or revoking the token under some specific conditions. To do that, there is a field is revoked, and this is revoked is a function, so we can also in the callback we can specify if the user is admin or not. So I create here, for example, another method is revoked, and this is revoked will be a function, async function, and it will have request payload and done. What are those parameters? Request is when I want to use the request parameters or the request body. I want to know something what is sending the user. The payload contains the data which are inside the token. For example, I want to get isAdmin from the token which is signed to the user, and this user is sending it to me with the request headers. So here, in this case, I can say if not payload.isAdmin, because now I have access to this isAdmin, to the payload of the token, then I will return that done is null and true. So in this case, we are saying that reject the token. So if any authorized API called and our user is not admin, then it will be rejected. And else, if he is admin, we can say done without any parameters. As we said before, we have only two types of user in our eShop. So we have admin and users. If you have more roles, you can here classify them. And here you define what is invoked or what is allowed. Now let's try that with Postman. If you remember, we have a user here, Thomas Jackson, which he is not admin on the eShop. And this is his data. So we see here that is admin is false. And when I try to post a product in our API, a new product, I will get the user is not authorized. Let's change the token to be with admin true. So let's go to the database manually and change this user to be an admin. So I will say here admin true. And then I click update. If I try now to use send, I will also get unauthorized. Why? Because I'm using the token which is loaded with isAdmin false. So we need to log in again to get a new token. So I go to the login API, I have the user and the password, I send a request, I got a new token, and let's use it in our post request on authorization. I replace it here and try again, and it successfully posted the product. Thanks to Express GWT that it has this method, so it was able and made us able to do, for example, this user role. Now our application is fully secure and nobody can use it or access it without any authorization or any admin role. Sometimes the admin of the webshop wants to know how many users or customers he has in his webshop. So in this case, he needs an API for getting the user count. We did that previously with the products. We had an API especially for getting how many products we have in our eShop. So let's copy it and go to the users API. After login and register, we can use it here. And we say the same, get count, but user, and here we say user count. If no user count, then return 500, and then you return for me user count. So let's save, try it with Postman. We go, for example, here, I say users and get count, try it. We have an error because I am doing a post. We need to do a get. We try again. We have user count 4. We have really 4 users. We didn't do also a delete request. So let's also copy it from, for example, the categories or products. We can do it from here. We get this one and then we put the delete request and I replace user, and everything else is user. So as you see here, it's exactly the same way how we did it with the products. We save it and now we are totally done with the users. I am so happy that you finished this module, and you will see the code where we arrived in the resources folder, so you can download it and then try things, change things, try by yourself and try to compare your code with the code which I uploaded.